Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. My name is David Powell. I'm with Hastings Architecture Associates. I am also the president of the board of directors for the Nashville Civic Design Center. Welcome to our 12th luncheon. This is a fantastic crowd. Very excited to announce and witness that this is the largest of the luncheons we have ever had. This is a record-breaking luncheon for us. Over 550 people and 68 sponsors, which is pretty astounding. That is really, really great. I want to make sure that we acknowledge some of our key sponsors, beginning with our program sponsor, which is Earl Swinson and Associates. I believe they're represented somewhere over here. Earl Swinson and Associates, right below us. That's right. Thank you so much for being the program sponsor. Our keystone sponsors are the Stephen J. Turner Family Foundation, the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design, Scott C. Chambers Fund, Vanderbilt University, Village Real Estate Services, and our media sponsor, Nashville Post. Please also note on either side of us what is supposed to be rolling. If someone can get that rolling, our Cornerstone and Voussoir, which is always fun to say, sponsors on the screens to the left and the right. So let's show our appreciation for our 68 sponsors. So anyone who's ever worked on an event like this that is this large and with this many people knows that it does not happen by itself. It does not happen overnight. It's a Herculean effort. And our effort has been led by the greatest cheerleaders, our co-chairs, Mary Pat Teague and Mr. Steve Turner. Steve Turner to my right. Thank you so much, Mary Pat and Steve. It also takes a committed board of directors, and they all really stepped up this year. The organization is also fortunate to have had strong board leadership throughout its entire history. So at this time, I'd like for anybody who has ever been on the board, current or past, if you would please stand so we can acknowledge you. It's a good-looking crew. All right, so I'd also like to acknowledge a few of our elected officials that are here today. First of all, congratulations goes to our new wonderful mayor, Megan Barry. And also, very important to our city's history, the former mayor, Bill Purcell, is with us today. Additionally, we have Metro Council members with us, Angie Henderson, Freddie O'Connell, Colby Sledge, and also joining us is Representative John Ray Clemens. Thank you all for attending and for all that you do for our city and for Middle Tennessee. So we owe so much to all of those who have supported the work of the Nashville Civic Design Center. I felt like it was important for us for me to read to you our mission statement, just to make sure we're all clear on what the Civic Design Center does. Our mission is to elevate the quality of Nashville's built environment and to promote public participation in creating a more beautiful and functional city for all. Not a bad mission at all. So enjoy your lunch. The program will begin shortly. Thanks so much.
Good afternoon. My name is Mary Pat Teague, and I serve on the board of the Design Center. And I'm pleased to be here with my luncheon co-chair, Steve Turner. And I believe I speak for both of us when I say how thrilled we are that all of you are here today and how much your support is so much sincerely appreciated. The funds raised today will be used for operating expenses, which obviously keep the doors of the Design Center open, which, the important thing is, allows for all the amazing work of the Design Center to continue. So thank you so much for being here and your support. So as we approach the 15th anniversary of the Design Center, Steve and I were asked to say a few words on how it all began. Steve?
So, it takes 20 years to make an overnight success. This saying is credited to Eddie Cantor. Most of y'all won't know who he is, but I certainly know who he was. He was a song and dance man whose hits included Making Whoopee, If You Knew Susie, and Yes, We Have No Bananas. Eddie knew that stars are made, not born. Nashville is a star among American cities these days. If I hadn't lived here since 1986, and if I had only known Nashville by recent coverage in the national media, I would think that our city is the equivalent of an overnight triumph on Broadway. Now, I strongly believe that Nashville deserves its current status as a smash hit, but we who are gathered in this room today know it didn't happen overnight. The gray-haired among us know that Nashville's success took decades of perseverance, opportunism, and leveraging people in the right place at the right time, because we lived through it. And we know that the Nashville Civic Design Center has played a significant role in our city's success. 20 years on, it's worth remembering how the Design Center happened and who made it happen.
So, some history for those of you who didn't live through it. About 20 years ago, the Urban Design Forum, progenitor of the Nashville Civic Design Center, emerged from a small group of friends who had a passion for urban design. Their passion had been provoked by the plan announced in 1994 to build a 6-lane highway designed for speeds of 45 miles per hour through the area south of Broadway, and linking I-24 on the east bank with I-40 in the west. Implementing this plan would have required the demolition of what was then the Shelby Bridge and the Demonbreun Viaduct. The viaduct was to be superseded by a road swooping south, nicking the corner of Cummings stations before reconnecting with Demonbreun Street. This was the plan for the Franklin corridor. Armed merely with legal pad for sign-ups and a fax machine for notifications, obviously pre-email, text, and tweets, Christine Crayley, then the architect critic for the Nashville scene, and Ann Roberts, then the director of Metro Historic Commission, laid plans to bring the corridor to the forefront of the civic discussion. The result was the Urban Design Forum. The purpose of the forum wasn't just to discuss the corridor, but also to consider other development proposals in the light of principles of good urban design. And good urban design didn't seem to be more asphalt for more cars.
Manuel and Janice Zeitlin volunteered to host the forum at their Zeitgeist Gallery in Cummings Station. The uncomfortable seating on foldable picnic chairs challenged the dedication of all who attended and the endurance of their posteriors. Feeling the need for an educational complement to the forum, a 1995 forum participant, Steve Tuck, approached Marlene Davis, then Dean of UT's College of Architecture and Design, about supplying a faculty member to teach a class in Urban Design 101. Marlene sent Mark Schimenti, who had recently joined the UT faculty. The class cost $150 for the series and met monthly in the Batman building on Saturdays from 8 to noon for 9 months. The auditorium was full, an amazing feat of dedication and intellectual curiosity for Saturday mornings. The class established the credibility of the idea of urban design in Nashville and gave us a common language to talk about planning issues confronting the city. The class was repeated for 3 years with more than 400 attending.
During this period, the Nashville scene editor, Bruce Dovey, devoted many column inches to the battle over Franklin Corridor and the future of what the newspaper had named SUBURBAN. Bruce asked Christine Crayley how they could come up with a positive plan for the area. She suggested staging an intensive planning process called a charrette. Bruce secured funding from the Frist Foundation and the Community Foundation. Christine asked Marlene Davis and Mark Chimenti to put together an urban design team to facilitate. Mayor Phil Bredesen involved his contacts at the Mayor's Institute for City Design. May Shane of Vanderbilt Institute of Public Policy Studies volunteered VIPs to serve as a host. For 3 cold and snowy days in January 1997, over 100 Nashvillians braved icy roads to become citizen planners, creating a vision for Sobro. This vision was translated into documents and drawings by the 19-member facilitator team of educators and practicing design professionals from throughout the Southeast.
The scene published the results as the plan for Sobro. Among the plan's significant features was the transformation of the corridor into an urban boulevard, the termination of the boulevard in a roundabout at 8th Avenue, and the retention of a viaduct over the gulch at Demonbreun Street. Does this sound familiar? Other forces emerged that undercut the corridor plan. Developers Bill Barkley and Steve Armistead had a vision for the Gulch as an urban neighborhood. This also should sound familiar. What I did was buy into that vision, literally. The investment in the Gulch conflicted with the premise that the area was only fit for infrastructure for the Franklin Corridor. In 1999, shortly before leaving office, Mayor Phil Bredesen called Christine Kraling and told her that he decided not to fund the corridor. Its future would be in the hands of the next mayor.
That next mayor would be Bill Purcell. Shortly after taking office, Mayor Purcell fulfilled a campaign promise by appointing a committee chaired by Kim Hawkins and including Ann Roberts, Steve Tuck, Steve Neighbors, and Christine Kraling. Their charge to research a civic design center for Nashville, how it would form, finance, and function. The rationale behind the design center was that the Urban Design Forum approached broader issues piecemeal through the lens of individual projects. What Nashville still needed was a communal vision, in particular for the downtown and transitional neighborhoods, to maintain and increase the city's vitality. But Nashville lacked one important tool to create vision and plan: a civic design center to help citizens establish goals and strategies for revitalization. An expanded committee did months of research on design centers elsewhere and conducted conversations with many dozens of members of the Nashville community. In 2000, Kim Hawkins presented the white paper laying out the blueprint to Mayor Purcell. The Nashville Civic Design Center would not replicate the work of the existing government development and planning agency, nor would it provide services that could be completed by design professionals. Rather, the Design Center would work with government and the private sector to establish a vision for Nashville and develop the highest standards for the contemporary community design by serving in a role that neither government nor the private designers has the luxury of assuming, the role of the independent educator. The Nashville Civic Design Center opened for business in 2001 with Kim Hawkins as the first chair and the board, and Mark Chimenti as the first design director.
The major item of business at the top of the new center's agenda was a 50-year vision for the city that became the Plan of Nashville. The focus was to be the central city and the first ring of neighborhoods, the areas that seemed at that point most in need of a consistent plan for revitalization. Community involvement in the development of the plan involved many workshops in many neighborhoods, as well as steady and beyond generous support of volunteers in the ranks of neighborhood leaders, designers from across the city, private developers, and metro government staff. Vanderbilt Creative Services donated the design of the book, which was published by Vanderbilt Press in 2005. Today, downtown Nashville and its first ring neighborhoods are booming, but beyond individual projects, it is 4 central themes in the plan that have the most impact on our thinking and our planning practice. First, embrace the Cumberland River. The city has really made great strides over the past 8 years, and we need to keep expanding that vision, incorporating history and public art, as well as entertainment and education uses. realize the crucial role of transportation infrastructure in determining urban form, and develop a balanced transportation system to serve all citizens. Recognize the neighborhoods as the basic building blocks of the city, and place equal emphasis on the mortar between the blocks. We must recognize that streets form a network of connectivity and serve as our principal public spaces. Educate the present and the future citizens on how to plan their communities, and then listen to what they say. It is this latter point that I want to stress in closing, but it suggests what I see as unfinished business. The plan of Nashville was fashioned along the lines of the Great Plan of Chicago that was conceived over 100 years ago. But unlike Chicago, here there was never an education component to enlighten the future leaders of our city. This has disappointed me, but it's not too late. Discussions on the introduction into the school curriculum of the principles of the Plan of Nashville between Design Center staff and myself are moving forward. So stay tuned. And more importantly, stay vigilant. And as you build our city, think long term. As Nashville musician Joe Spivey recently told the New York Times, I understand human nature enough to know that we're designed to change and evolve, but you've got to be particular about the things of worth that should be held on to. I want to thank you once again for attending and supporting the critical work of the Nashville Civic Design Center, and please continue eating. Thank you all.
We thought we were done, but we're not, no. So that was an amazing story, and I love hearing about all those collaborations and determination of so many people, many of them who are in this room today. They have helped pave Nashville's road for the future, and the future is looking very bright. So speaking of bright futures, to me, I have the special honor of introducing another longtime friend of the Nashville Civic Design Center, who just happens to be the 7th mayor of Nashville, Megan Barry. Please join me in welcoming Mayor Barry to the podium.
It's great to be here with all of you today. When I was walking in, somebody said to me, how many times have you spoken in the last several weeks since you became mayor? And I think this is number 70. And I say that because I know that at some point people will stop asking, so I'm happy to show up at the moment. It's great to be here with Gary. Thank you, Gary. And it's also great to be here with David. Thank you for all you do. We just heard a great history about the Design Center. And I come at a time as the next mayor of Nashville, and I come because of all of the work that has come before me. So when I have the honor to sit next to former Mayor Bill Purcell, and he can give me the history of why we're here, it makes me have a better understanding of where we need to go. And I look around you and I see all of you, the design professionals who bring an essence with you about what you want to see Nashville look like. And on my way over here today, I was thinking about some of the things that I like, the design elements that speak to me when I think of Nashville. And of course, those design elements that I love are the curve of the Music City Center. I love that curve. I love that we have at our new Ascend Amphitheater porches, our porch, the swings that make the porch, embracing the idea of the Cumberland River. I also appreciate that we put in public bathrooms as part of that process. It's a good design element, trust me. I love the new staircase that starts in the Gulch and goes up to Demonbreun. I love so many parts about downtown, but there are other elements out there around our county that are also special. We often talk about downtown, but I think it's important to remember that we have done other things. The new Bellevue Library, where we took an old tree that was part of that design site and created a piece of art inside. the Goodlettsville Library, where we joined a library and a school, and we created an outdoor learning space. The West Police Precinct, where we took an old 1960s car dealership building and reimagined it into a community space and put flood mitigation in and landscaping. And I can't forget the Southeast Commons, where we took an old mall and did an amazing thing. We actually jacked up a parking lot and we put in a park. Those are the elements that make Nashville special, that make us the it city. And we have lots of other big projects that are going on around Nashville, and I look out and I see all the cranes. Somebody writes my speeches for me, so I will tell you that one of the jokes that they would like me to tell at this moment is that I have recently signed an executive order making the crane the official bird of Nashville. I will tell him that you laughed. But seriously, it is really the things that people don't see that we care about as folks who care about urban design and planning that make the difference. And I'm talking about sidewalk design, street landscaping, materials, textures, the features of the built landscape that make a difference, the things that make us feel more gradually that if on direct observation you don't see it, but you experience it. And when the Civic Design Center started back in 2000, urban design in Nashville immediately began to improve. There is a design ethic. There is a quality that the center has brought to this city, and that is what makes us the it city. But there's still a whole lot to do. And I want to bring some of those same design elements to metro government. So when we look at a streetscape project, I want to make sure that all parties are included in that design. Public Works, planning, schools, MTA, parks, and the arts, and anyone else who wants to participate. And the Civic Design Center is a big part of that because we look to you and the professionals in this room to help hold us to the same high standard. Many of you may have seen the announcement that I made earlier this week, or last week, getting my weeks confused. Mark Sturdivant is coming on as my Director of Infrastructure, and I think Mark is here. A big part, yeah, you can clap for Mark. A big part of Mark's job as this director is going to make sure that all of our projects are holistic, that we are thinking about them from a design and we're not just off on silos. Mark helped bring the Bridgestone Arena to life. He brought Nissan Stadium to life, the Music City Center. These were huge, complicated projects, and he helped reshape the landscape of Nashville. And he also understands how government works, and that's critical. As I mentioned earlier, I want our public projects to also be purposeful. I'm very interested in connectivity. So if we build a sidewalk or we build a bikeway, it actually has to connect to something. It has to have a connection to a commercial area, a neighborhood, a school, parks, or transit. I see them as transit. I also believe, as I looked at my first week in office, that we have to update our sidewalk plan. And I've asked Public Works to do that. We did that right out of the gate. It has not been updated since 2008, and it's time. Again, Public Works will work with metro schools and planning and MTA and other departments to make sure that we are putting the best design out there. I look forward to seeing more sidewalks. I look forward to seeing more greenways. I look forward to seeing more bikeways. I look forward to looking at things, except for the bikes, that involve transit that gets you someplace where you don't necessarily have to get in a car. I did this on the campaign trail a lot. How many of you all walked to get here? How many of you got on a bus? How many of you got in your car? Okay. This is our challenge. Getting you out of a car, but you're not going to get out of your car unless you can get onto or into something else. And thankfully, Mark is going to solve that for me. Did you hear that, Mark? We need to also be healthy. And those types of opportunities where you get outside, you walk, you bike, will make Nashville more healthy. We need to make sure that we're also designing with affordability in mind. And I know that you're going to hear in a minute from our speaker who's going to talk about affordability and how that connects to so much of the urban design. As we move forward, it's also the little things about design that make Nashville better than other places. And one of the first things that I asked Public Works to do, and anybody else who's doing a public project in Nashville, is to stop using permanent paint on our sidewalks. Right now you will see the X's and the triangles and the markings, and that stays there forever. Now we will have water-soluble paint, and you get to scrub it off when you're gone. So it's the little things, I think, that speak to what kind of a city we are. It's an exciting time to be here. People want to be here. We're getting ready to host 3,000 people at the National League of Cities. We're getting ready to host the CMAs tonight. We're getting ready to host Vice President Biden tomorrow. Everybody wants to come and live and work and play in Nashville. As I continue to look around and see the opportunity, there's so much to do, but I come in at a great time because of all the great work that's come before me, and I thank the Civic Design Center for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Barry, so much. We are very much looking forward to working with you in the future and coming years to continue to improve our built environment. And please accept one more greetings and thank you all for being here. My name is Gary Gaston. I'm the Executive Director of the Nashville Civic Design Center. Thank you. Back in February of 2009, the Civic Design Center, in partnership with the University of Tennessee College of Architecture, kicked off the Designing Environments for Health lecture series. Our very first speaker for that was Dr. Richard Jackson. His presentation, entitled Health Spanning Disciplines, was one of those truly light bulb moments I had. And it served as the inspiration for the Civic Design Center to begin its research on how the built environment impacts public health in our city, and how we can also shape it for better outcomes. The project, which we named Shaping the Healthy Community, served as a primary focus of our work since 2011. Recognition is due to a very important individual who provided tremendous support to the work of the Civic Design Center during this period and advanced the topic of healthy living in our city. Former Mayor Carl Dean, who could not be with us here today. Thank you, Mayor. Our work on this topic has also received significant financial funding through our partnerships with the Metro Public Health Department, Vanderbilt University, the Nashville Area Metropolitan Planning Organization, and the Tennessee Department of Transportation. It is with great excitement that I inform you that our book, Shaping the Healthy Community, the Nashville Plan, has been completed. We will send the manuscript to the printer later this month and anticipate a release date and book signing event in January of 2016. We think of this as a New Year's resolution for the city. The book, which has taken 4 years of research and writing, is 350 pages long and has over 1,000 photographs, maps, and illustrations, and features 10 case study communities in places across Davidson County. It is a stunning publication, and I cannot wait until we all have a chance to hold it in our hands. And I am really serious about that. I cannot wait. 4 years, okay. I must give special recognition to key individuals, each who has devoted countless hours towards making this book a reality. First with Michael Ames, Joelle Smith-Bourne, and Dariel Mayer with Vanderbilt University Press, Deborah Hightower Brewington with Vanderbilt Creative Services, on our staff, Ron Yearwood, Eric Hoke, and Joe Mays, and my co-author, editor, and longtime friend, Christine Kraling. Thank you all. Following the book's release, Design Center staff will deliver presentations to neighborhoods and community groups all across the city. We are also working closely with the Tennessee Department of Transportation and the Tennessee Department of Health to apply tools and policy recommendations, as well as design strategies presented in the book across the entire state. In the meantime, please visit our current exhibition at the Downtown Public Library that features all the work that went into creating the book. The show is on display until November the 22nd. Later in November, the Design Center will launch an urban design walking tour smartphone app, which focuses on features of the built environment in the downtown central core. The next step is to expand the app program to the communities that are featured in our book. In Green Hills, for example, an app could highlight areas that are already walkable while presenting strategies for greater connectivity throughout the community. For the past 6 years, the Nashville Area MPO has funded projects selected through its public-private partnership with the Nashville Civic Design Center and the University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design. These projects explore potential for innovative transportation and land use planning and design practices for Middle Tennessee. Much of the work done by the UT students is directed by Professor T.K. Davis, is being incorporated into the MPO in its long-range planning initiatives, including its soon-to-be-published 2040 plan. This is just one example of the fruitful work done by UT College of Architecture and Design in our region. We thank the college's dean, Scott Poole, and the faculty and staff who've made the trip from Knoxville this morning to join us. We deeply value, Dean Poole, your continued support and the work of Professor T.K. Davis and his students on so many thought-provoking projects in Nashville. On December 1st, I would like to invite you to join us for our holiday open house at the Civic Design Center, where we will display TK's student work from this semester on scattered infill development sites throughout Davidson County that incorporate affordable housing as a central theme. This is extremely timely given the recent discussions on this topic. During December, the Design Center will also release a publication called Creating Inclusive Communities, Housing Policy for a Growing City. Similar to the publication we released last year on urban agriculture, this booklet seeks to inform people about the topic of affordable housing, existing projects within our city, the benefits and challenges we face, policy recommendations for expanding housing options in Nashville. I recently had the opportunity to speak about our mission and work to a class at Vanderbilt University taught by former Mayor Bill Purcell. During his introduction of me, I was struck by the words he used to describe the Nashville Civic Design Center. He called us the consciousness of the city. The following day, Bill emailed me to request a copy of my slideshow with a short message saying that the students were in awe of the center's work, and as was he with the impressions the students have of us. We can see the impact the Nashville Civic Design Center is having on the physical form in Nashville, but equally important is the impact we can have on the minds of students, who are our future leaders. And it doesn't matter the age. We have worked with elementary, middle, and high schools, as well as college students. Some of the most rewarding experiences I have had during my time with the center is when I see the spark of imagination from a student that has been introduced to the topic of design. This is why I'm thrilled today to announce that the Stephen Turner Family Foundation just yesterday approved a very generous grant to the Civic Design Center to establish an educational curriculum on civic engagement and urban design over the upcoming 2 years. Thank you so much, Mr. Turner. In closing today, I want to thank each and every one of you for your passion and commitment to making this city a better place. On behalf of our incredible staff and board of directors, we deeply appreciate the support you all provide to the Nashville Civic Design Center. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Get to sit at the back. I'm Keith Covington. I have operated an urban design and land planning firm for 10 years now. At Third Coast Design Studio, we have been fortunate over that time to work with the country, all over the country, shaping new communities and breathing life into old ones. Along the way, we have met many colleagues in disciplines ranging from designers like ourselves to planners and developers and every discipline in between. I first met Daniel Hernandez through a mutual friend and colleague. Even in that first meeting, inside the collaborative, open office environment of a Fifth Avenue skyscraper, it was clear to me that Daniel embodied many of the best attributes of those disciplines we've encountered along the way. While working directly with Daniel, I witnessed his understanding of the essential role of design in shaping our built environments and his commitment to environmental stewardship. The most unique quality, however, to me, is his ability to balance the creation of beautiful, sustainable places with the bottom line, realistic, market-driven work. After all, he was working for a development company, and his success is evident in that work. After 11 years as the managing director of the Jonathan Rose Company's planning practice, Daniel and two colleagues launched Topology, a real estate development advisory firm based in New York and New Jersey. Shortly thereafter, Mayor de Blasio's administration convinced Daniel to take a leave of absence from projects at Topology to serve as the Deputy Commissioner for Neighborhood Strategies at the Department of Housing Preservation and Development. He is currently leading efforts to implement the landmark New York City housing plan, which aims to create 200,000 units of, quote, affordable housing for every New Yorker over the next 10 years. Daniel earned his Bachelor of Science at California State University, his Master's of Architecture from the UCLA Graduate School of Architecture and Urban Planning, and he is a Loeb Fellow at Harvard's Graduate School of Design. He has developed policy for organizations and agencies ranging from Enterprise Community Partners, founded by the late James Rouse, to HUD and the EPA. Daniel was also a member of the core committee that authored the U.S. Green Building Council's Lead for Neighborhood Development program. By the way, Nashville's very own Gulch neighborhood was the first LEED certified neighborhood under that program in the South. Cities today, whether established, evolving, or emerging, are faced with many of the same challenges: affordability, mobility, gentrification, character transformation, preservation, health. The list goes on and on. This is true for cities big and small, and it's certainly true for Nashville right now. Daniel has had the opportunity to tackle many, if not all, of these issues throughout his career, and as a result, he has become one of the country's leading experts on planning and developing equitable neighborhoods at every scale. On behalf of the Nashville Civic Design Center, it is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Mr. Daniel Hernandez.
Well, I don't know who that person is that he's talking about. My mom and dad would be so proud with an introduction like that. When I was listening to it also, I was thinking that that person also sounds somewhat schizophrenic, in that there's been so many things that attract me in my career that I sort of have deviated in various ways, from community development, working in grassroots organizations in San Francisco, to working for some of the largest development companies in New York, and now working for Mayor de Blasio. But everything has some interconnected meaning, and we talked a lot about connections today and connectivity, and I just want to thank the amazing show of generosity that the Civic Design Center has shown. And I want to thank Jeannie and Eddie, wherever they are, who actually were one of the main reasons I came here. I get asked to speak every once in a while, but there was a double reason to be able to see some old friends from my Peace Corps days in Honduras. And so the ideas of connections and the ways that we create cities and neighborhoods is a part of just fundamentally who we are as people. I got involved in this profession because those were sort of the elements and the values that I wanted to pursue, and understand how we actually can build better places that create and connect, or that connect people in our built environments. You guys are going through an amazing, amazing moment in your sort of evolution as a city. I've had the chance to work around the city, around the country with various cities, but the most exciting are the emerging markets, because of the types of questions that elected officials, communities, developers, designers have to deal with every day. At the core, they're extremely tense economic issues. As this picture sort of shows, the transition of a neighborhood from one that was probably not doing so well just a few years ago, or months ago even, and the injection, I should say, of economics and the market forces that will have a long-term impact on this neighborhood. But it raises questions about equality, it raises questions about displacement, and it raises questions about the diversity and sort of quality of life in the city. We're getting lots of information about you guys in New York City and in the New York Times. This was an article that was in the paper recently. But again, at the core of a lot of this, yes, we're dealing with environmental issues, equity issues, and economic issues. But at the core, it's a lot about who we are and how we identify ourselves as a city and as a group of people living in a city. And everything that we bring together as a society that happens in a city, the creativity, the amount of economic generation that we do for our own city as well as for the country, it really identifies who it represents who we are, and it identifies us as a city nationally. You guys are dealing with all of this right now, and the mayor's gone now, but these are sort of at the core of what I wanted to talk to you today, because this city is not unlike what New York is experiencing. So as I was going through the weekend, and Eddie and Jeannie were showing me different neighborhoods here in the city, I was saying, how am I ever going to relate New York City to Nashville? And I was ready to actually go back home, because I think I thought I might disappoint you guys in trying to figure out what that connection was. But as I began driving around and hearing the different stories from different people that I met over the past few days, the issues are exactly the same. New York City is not only Manhattan, it's outer boroughs. It's the outside, way out far in Queens and Brooklyn and the Bronx and Upper Manhattan. These neighborhoods are going through major transition. They're emerging markets, and the people who live in those neighborhoods have great fears about displacement. I don't use the term gentrification because I think it's actually a very academic term that we all can use in our own discussions with each other, but I try not to use it very often because I think that it creates an us and them sort of situation. We're coming in, you're being displaced out. But displacement actually is a word that I can work with. I feel like displacement is something that I can problem solve around. If displacement is what we're trying to prevent, I can create mechanisms, tools, financial instruments, and policy to help battle displacement. Gentrification, again, I think is a difficult paradigm for many people to sort of embrace around ways that we want to stop gentrification, but it creates economic development opportunities. And so we want to maybe think more about in terms of displacement and how we protect neighborhoods and people living in those neighborhoods from being wholesale displacement. So I arrived as a result of the Housing New York plan, which Keith talked, it was 200,000 units over the next 10 years. It's its big theme. There were a lot of other things in it, but that was the big theme that the mayor wanted to put out, a number. Out of that plan, the Office of Neighborhood Strategies was created, which is I'm now the commissioner of. It's a new office, so I'm excited about being the first commissioner of that. So I was able to hire an amazing amount of staff, and I know the mayor just brought on some people onto her staff as well, which is also very exciting. I was able to do the same thing in New York City, but when I got called by the mayor's administration, the person that you see in the picture beside me is Vicki Dean, who was an attorney by training, but she was working at the Furman Center at NYU. She's an amazing statistician, amazing policy analyst, and she called me, and I actually had no idea who she was. I saw HPD, which is Housing Preservation Development. I saw that at the bottom. I thought, oh, it's probably some planner wanting to talk to me about how to plan neighborhoods, blah, blah, blah. But this is when I was working at I was at Topology, my firm, and I was in my pajamas at 10 o'clock in the morning, sitting at my dining room table, working, of course. But I thought, well, maybe I'll just look at who she was, and she was the direct appointee by the mayor to run the Housing Preservation Development Department. So I called her, I said to her, I'm actually really busy over the next couple of weeks. We'll set up a time within the next couple of weeks. But when I saw that she was the main commissioner for the department, I wrote an email. I said, oh, something just cleared up later, and I'll be happy to go see you. So this was like last summer. I had no idea that she was interviewing me. I really thought that she just wanted some knowledge about real estate development, urban planning, policy making, and just stuff that I might be able to advise her on. I actually thought it was going to be a contract for Topology, my firm. But as the summer went on and we began to know each other, she asked me to join her team. And I took about a month to say yes, and it's been an amazing ride. I've never worked for government before, and it's been fantastic. The housing agenda is at the core of the mayor's, the housing policy is at the core of the mayor's agenda, so it's been an exciting time there. But again, it was 200,000 units, and the big message we wanted to tell people was that 200,000 units was represented by 60% of existing affordable housing that we wanted to preserve. There's a lot of rent-regulated units in Manhattan, and there's a lot of projects that we have financed and that are rent restricted through regulatory agreements. And we wanted to make sure that we didn't lose those units in the marketplace. The other 40% was new construction, and that we also wanted to make clear in the housing plan to whom it was going to be affordable. So there you see sort of an income strata, and basically the message that we wanted to get out there, that we were wanting to keep working families, people living in New York City, and so that we would have a very diverse, economically healthy city. I broke it down into 3 project areas, which was one, like I was just saying, produce more housing, and we would do that through some zoning, and I'll talk a little bit more about that, which is right now on the streets and is very contentious right now. The second one was preserving the existing, and to prevent displacement using a variety of tools, whether they were legal tools, as well as making sure that we weren't losing units in the marketplace. And then finally, which is one of the reasons why my office was created, is to do it in collaboration with other city agencies as well as with the communities. We also put out there in the plan, similar to what you guys are experiencing, is there's major population growth happening in New York City, and that was going to put a demand on our housing supply, and our housing supply was already not meeting the demands of affordability for low and extremely low income households. So we show them the need to actually, the crisis that everyone was experiencing and the need for new housing. And then we also coupled that with not only, yes, our incomes are going up, but not as rapidly and not as high as our housing cost, which then create a housing burden. We defined that for people and also began to show that the housing burden was even higher for low and extremely low income households. So that's how we created the plan. When I got there, we started then relating those sorts of issues to the health of neighborhoods. And health, I meant mental and physical health as well, because it provided me a lens to be able to talk to people other than just affordability. We began talking about just having affordable housing, having a high rent burden, created additional pressures, whether they were mental or physical in a household. And the HPD has an amazing research team, and they had already begun tracking one group of people that had been separated into 2 groups. So the group was people who had applied for affordable housing through our website, those that got in, and those that didn't. So we began tracking various indicators of health in these households, and it was economic health, it was physical health, it was mental health, et cetera. But we began noticing some clear trends. So the higher the rent burden, the less likely they were to delay going to the doctor or even setting up doctor's appointments. Housing quality, so people who did not get in and went back to their units and there was quality issues in their housing, indicators such as rodents or roaches or other peeling paint were indicators of asthma diagnosis, but even when you had more than 2 or 3, as you see in the last bar, the health of that household frequently the chances for asthma diagnosis frequently goes up much higher. The blue group in this, for example, are the people who got into affordable housing, and the gray group is those who didn't. So you see these differences in sort of the stresses that happen in the individual households. And again, even behavior we're beginning to track, how much time they're walking, how much time they're watching television, vegetable eating, et cetera. But it tells us a story about affordable housing as a bigger intervention than the ones that we typically think of, which can be contentious when we're out in the neighborhoods, when it's just about equity and preventing displacement. If we talk more about also the health of households and communities, it begins to transform the discussion. So we know that as designers, planners, developers, policymakers, that housing has played a critical role in the way that we think about cities and the use that housing has been as a generator of various things. So health is one of the pieces that housing has been created to address. It's been used as an economic driver, and it's been used as a social cause. As a health driver, we think about in the 1930s when the public housing was first created in New York City. This is a project that was built in the 1930s on the Lower East Side, which still exists today. It was built because it was addressing asthma, lung-related problems. They called it the lung block. And it was the problems with those units, the residential units, was they didn't have a lot of access to light and air, as well as major sanitary problems in the rear yards of those blocks. As a result of New York City creating one of the first public housing projects, by the end of the 1930s, the U.S. Housing Act was passed. We created public housing authorities. By 1949, they were beginning to assemble and circulate housing standards, which then began to form the way that housing, and particularly affordable housing, was defined across the country. So when you look at this as a design strategy, you know that it was directly related to the concerns that the country had around light and air. So these sort of towers in the park was the solution, and we see these types of buildings then going across the country. So now fast forwarding, the design community then comes back together after sort of creating this tower in the park solution. And then we get people like Christopher Alexander, who are not only looking at the way that we address health concerns, but the social fabric of neighborhoods. So he begins looking at the way that people interact in the public realm and within their domestic environments. And again, fast forward, the Congress of the New Urbanism used a lot of that work then to create neighborhood fabric, mostly looking at traditional neighborhood design. They were then commissioned by HUD during the Hope 6 era to come up with design standards for the way that we would redesign affordable housing, the public housing sites around the country. And a lot of those sites, and I know you guys have had some of those too, were redesigned during the Clinton administration. But major signature projects like Diggstown in Norfolk, Virginia, really looked at design fabric and the social interactions in our neighborhoods, and pretty much stopped there. Then we also thought of design and the intervention of housing from an economic factor. This is in the Bronx, Jimmy Carter walking around during the Great Society movement talking about we need to use these sites not only as affordable housing, but as economic generators for our communities. I'll talk about this site in just a little while because it becomes significant again. So this is in 1977. That site did not get redeveloped until the mid-2000s, and I'll talk a little bit about that. So now fast forwarding again, we get an agenda around the economic, global climate change and the economics of green and energy efficiency design. As Keith said, I helped write the LEED ND program, and then it began getting circulated. We were then, at that moment, in those very early years of the green and energy efficient movement, we were getting pushback by the marketplace, particularly developers, who were saying that using these standards were going to increase, and did increase, the cost of construction. We had to then begin retooling the way that we would communicate the use of these standards by actually identifying things that didn't increase the cost of construction, and then also creating a stronger marketplace in the construction industry for those materials. So those are all early days, and I'll talk a little bit about why that is significant for the way that we might think about health as an overlay on the design of buildings as well. But this is the site that Jimmy Carter was walking on. It's up in the Bronx, and the AIA and HP, the city, all came together to issue an RFP. They wanted to ask the development and design community, what is the future of affordable housing in American cities, and particularly in New York? That's that same site again. The company that I work for, Jonathan Rose Company, as many of you probably know this project, Via Verde, was selected. And this is a diagram of it that was done by Grimshaw Architects based in London. They have a New York office. But basically, it was a south-facing site, and we took advantage of that by tiering a series of exposed courtyards down the side of the building, and with the idea of it being a green, efficient building, but also a healthy building in that all these courtyards were connected through an external stairway. So you have a choice of whether you can go up in the elevator to your floor, or you can actually climb a series of stairs on the exterior of the building. The other story that I think is interesting about this is that it begins to look back also at what I think Congressmen and urbanists were trying to do, but to talk about neighborhood fabric. So this is a vertical neighborhood fabric versus if, more Nashville, a more horizontal fabric. But I say that because there is various types of tenures in here. So there's both rental as well as home ownership, and there's affordable as well as market rate in the rental and the for sale program. We also got a grocer to go in, as well as a health center to go into the building as well, because during the community workshops we heard a lot about the problems that the communities were having around health. These are some of the pictures of the completed project. It's one of the courtyards. They call this one the Grove, but each different ones, oh, that's too bad, have different purposes. Again, there's one of the courtyards or the terraces has a garden, vegetable garden on it as well. We're using the Green Communities and the LEED ND program in all of our RFPs that we issue out of my office now as a requirement. So when people respond, developers respond to it, they're required to tell us what program they're meeting and how they're meeting it. We're now, in 2016, because I've been working with the Department of Health, that will be requiring these standards as well. A few years ago, we worked with, I wasn't there at the time, but the Department of Design and Construction, HPD, worked with them to create these active design guidelines for affordable housing. When I got there, I started identifying pieces again, thinking about those early days of energy efficient buildings, identifying things that just don't cost money, but they require deliberate design action. So these are just some of them that we extrapolated. We're now putting these in RFPs so that developers don't come back to us and say, we can't do that, that costs too much money. But actually, these are things, again, that the design community can just respond to and begin incorporating. One of the signature projects that has been developed out of the Active Design Guidelines is Arbor House, also up in the Bronx. Amazing play spaces, gym, just all sorts of amazing, great health kind of activities injected into the design of that building. But I think one of the signature pieces of the Arbor House is a community garden that's on the top floor. It serves as a community-supported agriculture that provides produce for local restaurants in the Bronx as well as for the residents that live in the building. So there's access to fresh food. I bring up this slide because I know that this is one of the projects that's on the tables here that can have a landmark, I keep on using the term landmark, I'm sorry, that can have a major or significant impact on the way that people think about neighborhoods here in Nashville. So I show the Villa Verde project and I show the Arbor House project because they both began thinking about sort of the mixed income strategy, the mixed tenure strategy, but also the green infrastructure and health environmental sort of factors that can go into a site plan like this. So I put it up only bring it up as a provocative opportunity for the designers and developers in the room to sort of begin interjecting and overlaying those types of ideas into the design of projects. This next piece takes us a little bit off, but what I heard over the past few days was the issues around whether you guys are going to be putting in, what type of transit systems you guys are thinking about. While I was at Jonathan Rose Companies, we were asked by EPA to help them communicate to communities why transportation, housing, and affordability were so linked. So we looked at different housing types to be able to communicate those three things together. So we looked at housing types: the family detached, the single family or attached, and then the multifamily buildings, and set those in two different environments: the conventional suburban development type environment versus the transit-oriented development environment, meaning compact, mixed use. And we then, on the kind of the statistics and data, we just put into a quick diagram. Even if you are in a conventional suburban development and you have a green building, so the green column there represents you drive a Prius and you live in a Energy Star home, you're still consuming a lot more energy than someone who's living in a compact development near transportation choices. So that was well and interesting for HUD and EPA and DOT, but we wanted to get this out to communities. So we took this show on the road with the EPA, but so we created these avatars, really. They were just sort of made-up people. So we said, here's Dave. This is where Dave lives. Here's the neighborhood that Dave lives in. Here's his house, and here's his car, and this is what he does every day in his car, how many miles, how much time he actually spends in that car. And then we gave Dave a BTU score based on how much energy he uses and how much he spends on energy each year. And this is Karen, and Karen lives here, and this is the kind of building she lives in. She has a car, but she takes a mass transit choice to work, so it reduces her reliance on her car every day, but she still has errands to run. Recognize that she's not living in New York City where there's subways that can take you everywhere, just like most of the country, so she needs a car. But this is Karen's score, and this is how much she's spending on energy each year. So we did it for a variety of household types: young, old, single, married, etc. But we also then asked the question, with the vulnerability of energy cost in the country, what does it mean if it increases 20% on household incomes to these different household types? And the choices we make directly have, an impact on our pocketbooks. So looking into the future, as neighborhood cities change and the demographics change, what can we then predict, and how can we begin designing for those new populations of people? And so we encourage encourage different municipalities to take on this kind of study so that they can show the trends that would be happening in their particular area, but then just led to what we all agreed to. I'm speaking to the choir here: connected communities, compact communities, walkable communities, transportation choices, mixed income, mixed use sorts of neighborhoods. Places that we said, and we were trying to figure out, we never got there, but places where people are just happy because they have choices. So anyway, that was a great project. I'm going to go back to New York now on this on our housing plan because we're dealing a lot of the same stuff that you're dealing with. This notion of this problem of disparity in people. Mayor de Blasio ran on a campaign of Tale of Two Cities was what was got in the paper a lot, but basically incredibly poor people and extremely wealthy people living in these new towers, actually just right down the street from me. So you can kind of see down below that, there's Central Park. That's on 57th or 58th. I live on 56th. Like I said, just 2 blocks away, and the dynamics of the neighborhoods are just drastically changing, and as a result, the design of our city is changing. So this was the name of the article that went up, and the sort of these ultra uber luxury apartments that we've never really seen. We do have a voluntary inclusionary program in New York City. Developers can choose to use it. What they get is additional floor area, and they can then build higher and more units. And in return, we get some levels of affordability, and we at HPD finance some of that affordability if it's in more transitional neighborhoods. So this is the demand that we see in those buildings. This is a project in Chelsea. So you see the High Line right there. This is actually the last phase of the High Line. It hasn't been completed when this article was done, but it's now open. But these units then are interspersed inside of these market rate residential towers. And most of those are occurring in downtown or midtown Manhattan and some in downtown Brooklyn. Right now, what's on the street and what is occupying my time and my staff's time, the commissioner's time, the mayor's time, is we are now putting out the mandatory inclusionary housing program. It's built on the success of the voluntary program, but it requires a zoning text to go out. And so we went through about an 8-month process of studying mandatory inclusionary housing programs around the country. We did economic analysis so we can actually talk to developers about their expected rates of return. We don't want to stop production, but at the same time, we want to be able to capture the market as it grows within various neighborhoods in New York City. So we looked at different programs. We came up with this as the options that neighborhoods can choose, options 1 and 2, and 3 is in limited areas. I won't go into the details of it, but we're beginning to communicate that more and more with neighborhoods about here's your area median income, here's your household income and what that represents, who that is, and how much the rents would be through the inclusionary program units, the units that got built through the program. So we're out there talking to various neighborhoods. The way that the inclusionary housing program would be applied is if the public, the government, the city decides to rezone a neighborhood and increase the opportunity for residential development, that would then trigger the inclusionary housing program, and then a council member would be the responsible party to say which of those options, whether it's 20% at 60% of AMI or 30% at 80% of AMI, and they would choose based on their own political strategy. Is one of the ways that we're actually getting this passed is giving them the opportunity to determine the income strata. So we're in different neighborhoods and we're planning with people. So one of the things I wanted to try to get out there to the public was that it's not the expert sitting in an office, and we didn't hire some consultant to help figure all this out when it comes to the planning strategy, like a Howard Rourke and an Ayn Rand model. And it's not Robert Moses who had the public authority to go in and do major zoning actions throughout the city. And maybe it's a little bit more like Jane Jacobs, but there's a lot of public action that we need in order to apply an inclusionary housing program. But more importantly for me, it's about trying to just have fun in this job because it's incredibly intense. I'm just trying to build some momentum around having fun in neighborhoods. So I'm trying to build a society of problem solvers, design thinkers, and ultimately citizen planners is what I'm sort of calling it. But the mayor has asked us to be out in the neighborhoods. We cannot do this without public acceptance of our affordable housing strategy, and particularly the inclusionary housing program that requires zoning approvals by communities. So by setting up the housing plan was clearly articulated a crisis. The crisis has brought communities to the, out. So we're having to meet with them, not having to, it's part of our job, it's what we as servants are doing. But they're coming to us as advocates. And so what I'm trying to do is change that advocacy negotiating role to one of problem solvers and design thinkers. It's a whole different type of workshop and a whole different type of engagement that New Yorkers are used to, which was a surprise to me because you guys are doing amazing, amazing civic engagement work here. That doesn't happen in New York, and I think it just probably has to do with more of the personality types of New Yorkers. It's like, this is what we're going to do, and this is what you're going to say, and then we're going to fight it, and then that's the end of it, and then it's done. But what we're trying to do is to actually get a much more sustainable network of people who actually know how to problem solve with us in neighborhoods. So we hired Gail Studio. You'll meet Matthew Lister, who's the guy standing up with his hand like this. He'll be here tomorrow for the League of Cities. He's a personal friend of Keith and mine, and they help us build what we then became known as the Neighborhood Planning Playbook. It is the way that city agencies will work together, and that's the most important product outcome of that. But it also was a way to tell communities what they can expect from us and how we're organizing ourselves to engage them. So within our office, we can do all sorts of desktop research to understand the data of where their neighborhoods are going, where they've been, and the things that they'll have to be dealing with regarding affordability, health, various different trends that different agencies will bring to the table. But more importantly, or of equal importance, we wanted to understand how that data is part of the lived experiences in neighborhoods. It goes through a very, a logical design thinking, problem-solving process where you organize, you identify the major problems, you begin meeting with people, listening to them, observing, coming up with solutions, and then finalizing your plan and implementing. And in the implementing phase here is actually creating the zoning text that would be approved by the community. We're creating all sorts of communication tools to be able to talk about where the city is, and then particularly where their neighborhood is in comparison to the way that the city is evolving over time, to create a transparent and collaborative process. We're out in the neighborhoods. It's been a very interesting process, and we're out in 7 neighborhoods, and the mayor wants us to issue another 5 or 6 neighborhoods by the end of the year, which means a lot of work, and we're overworked already. But it also, I think, what's been great about it is that this weekend I was visiting Jeannie's place of work, and neighborhoods are doing this all over the country, and it's exciting to see that there's a group of people that you guys can tap to help problem solve with you, that we don't have to take on the full burden of creating the solutions. There's people who actually have some solutions that we can create with them to build our cities out. So again, hopefully you'll join me in becoming one of the promoters of citizen planners, because you guys are on the precipice of an amazing, amazing place. You already are building a beautiful public infrastructure in your city that creates the economic value that developers love, but you are still dealing with the questions about equity and displacement in cities. I visited this project that also has low-income housing tax credit, artist live work, as well as market rate housing up on the hill that I'm sure your city wants to see more of. But I think that the paradigm shift in the way that you began talking about it, rather than the fear of the displacement factor or the opportunity, the happy opportunity that the economic strength provides, but putting an umbrella of equitable development doesn't necessarily mean that development stops. It actually just happens with a much more meaningful and intentional way about creating a diverse, aesthetically beautiful city. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk with you.
Daniel, thank you so much for coming to Nashville and sharing your experiences and insights with us. I'm glad you had some time to enjoy the city before speaking today. And Keith, thank you so much for introducing the Design Center and Daniel. I'm Scott Chambers, a longtime supporter of the Nashville Civic Design Center, and I currently serve as the Vice President of the Board. Both as a resident of Nashville and a developer, I'm a firm believer that we all have a responsibility and that we actually owe it to ourselves to make our built environment the very best that it can be by observing, questioning, challenging, and always envisioning. I support the Civic Design Center because I believe it plays such an essential role in helping us accomplish this goal. I want to acknowledge the fantastic staff at the Design Center. Gary Gaston, Ron Yearwood, Abby Wheeler, Eric Hoke, and Joe Mays, as well as the numerous design and research fellows and interns. Without your work, without your devotion, your creativity, day after day, we would not be able to move forward with our mission. And I'd like to thank you all very, very much. This year's luncheon has raised a record $140,000 in funding that enables the center in the coming year to continue our mission of improving the quality of life in Nashville by focusing on the quality of its built environment. We welcome all of you and encourage you to visit the Design Center, our website, attend our events, and get involved with the critical work that we are doing. Once again, I want to thank you all very much for being here, for your support, and we wish you all a very good afternoon.